Have a good time.
Welcome to our pirate ship. Well, I didn't put it in the notes, so I'm going to spring this on you kind of as a surprise, man. Tell us all about your experience watching the Oscars last night.
It's kind of like the flying the flag at half-mast for Joy Reid. Was a negative 5 seconds I paid attention.
Yeah, I didn't watch it either. I can't remember the last time I did. I watched the coverage a little bit, and apparently it wasn't too controversial because there was only one political joke. But I got to tell you,
right?
Yeah, that's what they said. So. That's what they said. Now I don't know.
Will Smith didn't get up and slap anybody.
Yeah, nobody got slapped. Maybe the public did, because I don't think anybody's actually watching these movies. It doesn't seem like.
I didn't even know it was on, so you can rest assured we did not watch it.
But, there's not a whole lot to talk about these days, is there?
No, I think we ought to just shut down.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk a little bit about something that probably should have gotten an Oscar, be nominated, and that was the press conference this week between our great president, President Trump, J.D. Vance, Vice President, and President of the Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. That was as President Trump said, it was interesting TV.
It was interesting TV. That's right. It is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And in fact, I'm going to be on a radio show tomorrow talking about this because I have a different slant on it. And I heard one of the callers on that show, and I think this is a way a lot of people feel, is those things all should have been done behind the scenes and then come out to do your signing in public. Everything's done. You make that announcement instead of, it almost looked like a reality show there for a minute.
Yeah, I tell you, it was something else. And we're going to play some clips of it. The whole meeting lasted about 40 minutes, so we're not going to be playing all of that. But there was about a 10 to 11-minute stretch down the end that is certainly getting the most publicity. So we're going to play a few clips of that and kind of break it down and give our thoughts on it. So the first clip, I call it Trump Aligned with America. Check this out.
And now I'm talking with my friends in Poland, and they are worried that you align yourself too much with Putin. What's your message for them?
Well, if I didn't align myself with both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, "Hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal?" That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred, and I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to?
Well, that was a remarkable clip, and there's more to come. But I love when President Trump, Ted, says that he is aligned with America.
Imagine that, the president thinking that.
And he also expands to say he's aligned with the world. I mean, it's just amazing, as he says later in the video, TV. And I got what you said about the closed doors, and we're going to talk about that more in a minute because the president actually addresses that issue. But you got to assume, I guess, and you know what they say about assuming, that they did hash some of this out behind closed doors.
I sure would have hoped so.
Seemed like that they maybe Zelensky had an agenda there. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm going to delve into that more, and that's what I'm going to talk about tomorrow on another show. But the one thing I can tell you about President Trump, he loves this country. And one of my favorite pictures, and I know you've seen it, is where he's hugging the American flag and just smiling. I've not seen a president do that before, and, Trump's more of a showman. But I think it exudes how he feels about this country and how a lot of people feel about it. It's interesting. I had a Japanese ambassador riding with me through our district, and he says, "I can't believe how many American flags I see everywhere." And he goes, "People here really love your country, don't they?" And I says, "Yeah, isn't that the way it is in Japan?" He goes, "No, there's still shame from World War II." And, that's something I never thought about. So, yeah, we have a great country, and Trump, he loves this country.
Well, you're absolutely right. Sadly, not everybody in America feels that way. I remember there was a video that was out a few years ago where this lady on MSNBC was talking about going. This was prior to the 2020 election, and she talked about going out on Long Island in New York and being disturbed by all the American flags and the Trump signs that she saw, and the people riding in the back of pickup trucks and that
Right.
type of thing. I don't know if you ever saw that, but she was dismayed.
She needs to
by-
come to the South and see the ones with the big flags on it and the boat parades. Yeah, I feel bad for people like that because they're in the wrong country, or it's the country they were trying to reimagine with the Obama and Biden administration, and the American people said, not this time.
Well, you know, in that clip we just played, President Trump talked about he's not aligned with anyone except America. And then he goes and says he's aligned with the world and trying to stop the war. And I've been hearing a lot of criticism from the left and even some on the right that somehow that President Trump has become an arm of Vladimir Putin and an arm of the Kremlin. And the thing that gets me is how they talk about how even Zelensky talks about in the video that you can't trust anything that Vladimir Putin says, right?
That's true.
But now they're playing. Apparently, there was some press out of the Kremlin that says that President Trump, his new policy, if you want to call it new, is aligned more with Russia's policy, and they've been playing that over and over and over. So, which is it? Can you believe what Vladimir Putin says or not? I
You mean the guy that throws people out of hotel rooms and poisons people around the world? Trust him? Nah, you can't trust that guy. So that's, I think, the direction we need to look at, or the foreign policy. When you look at that, what is America projecting? Are they aligning with Putin? I mean, that's going to play out down the road, 2, 3, 4 years. And then what signal does that send to somebody like Kim Jong-un in North Korea, who has just incidentally opened up travel to North Korea? I don't think I want to be on the first tour that goes there, or the second one. And then what signals does that send to Xi Jinping on the world stage? So those are things that are going to, need to be flushed out. And, we've got a great Secretary of State with Marco Rubio, and I think they'll get the policy correct, and I think it'll make America stronger. And I think you'll see that war in Ukraine come to an end. And I'll turn it over to you.
Well, we're going to play another short clip from the same 10-minute segment, and I've titled this Save Your Country. So check this out, and we'll come back and talk about it.
You are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine? That you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful
answer.
to come to the Oval Office of the United
answer.
States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions.
Part of the video is somewhat controversial on a lot of sides because there are some people who really believe that J.D. Vance stood up and did what he should do, and there are, of course, people on the left are basically using that as fodder to attack the president. But there are even Republicans that say that maybe the vice president shouldn't have done that. I have kind of mixed feelings about it myself. What are your thoughts, Ted?
No, I agree with that. I'm probably one of the ones that said, you probably shouldn't have said that. To ask him to say thank you to the American people right there. I mean, again, that all that stuff should have been worked out ahead of time, and had a great press conference, of signing the agreement, and then shaking hands and go on with business. But to get into that spat, like I said, it's almost like a reality show. And is that what you want foreign policy to be on the world stage? Because you got to look at what the projection is. You can play a tough guy, but how's that make relationships with other people?
Well, like President Trump will say later in the video, he can be as tough as anybody. But and we talked a little bit about this last week leading up to what we assumed would be a deal meeting, that you don't make friends. I mean, you don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies. So the idea that you've got to pick one side over the other to negotiate a deal is just not a reality. I mean, the president is in a tough position in that he has to seem to be neutral. I don't think that President Trump, trusts Vladimir Putin. I think like he says later, I think he trusts the fact that Vladimir Putin believes that he'll do exactly what he says he's going to do. The president, I mean. The president's going to do what he said he's going to do.
Yeah, our president, I think,
Right,
will.
that's what
He'll
I'm talking
follow
about.
through with that. The genius of Trump is he throws out these deals that gets everybody scurrying and scammering, and you can see what's going on in the EU and France and these other countries. They're talking about creating a European army, which is probably something they need to do. And, so Trump throws this out there, kind of shakes everything up. And what do they say? You can't have scrambled eggs without breaking the eggs.
Well, and they're very expensive now.
They're very expensive now. That's something
break
else we
too
need
many
to deal
eggs.
with. That's another great topic. But I think the end result is people will you know what? It's kind of like that president in Kenya when they were polling foreign aid. And he said to his people, because they're all up in outrage, that how dare America do this? And he goes, why are you looking at America to solve our problems? It is our problem. Excuse me. And I think that's what's going to come out of this is these other nations are going to say, oh, it's a new day in America or a new day on the world stage, and we need to start carrying our own load.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but the I don't know if they call him the president of the Congo. I guess they're having perpetual civil war there, it seems like. But he came out and said, we'll sign a minerals deal with you. And they've got a lot of minerals over there. So it is interesting how
we need to get over and do it because China is kicking our tail around the world on critical minerals and, copper and all the minerals. And that's something where we need to refocus. In fact, I'll be up in D.C. on March 11th talking to the House Foreign Affairs Committee as a witness and talking about the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, how it's not being used as strategically as it can. And it's basically to counter China in a lot of these areas.
Well, we look forward to not only seeing your testimony, but hearing your remarks
Sure.
when you get back. Well, I want to play another short clip here, and this is where Vladimir Zelensky talks about the impact potentially to America, and he talks about that we're protected by a nice ocean. And I thought this was the one part where maybe he did show some disrespect to what we've done to this point and to President Trump. But let's play this video and come back and talk about it.
Nice ocean, and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know that.
bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
you're
I'm not
You're
dictating.
in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influenced.
We're going to feel
I'm-
very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the very
bad position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right about
From the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position.
I was
have the
saying-
cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing
But
cards.
right now, you don't.
I'm very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War
What do you-
III.
what do you
You're
think about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And
Yeah.
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
Yeah, I think, Ted, at that point was where the president, and you could kind of see it in his body language there, that he was probably the most upset at that
You
very
think he was
moment.
a little upset?
He looked like he was a little ticked off
He
about
sure
that.
was, yeah.
Especially when Zelensky said, but we have our ocean, and essentially said that it looked like that they're protecting America by fighting Putin now over there. That's kind of what it sounded like to me.
Well, I can understand why people think of that, but if they see America pulling out of Russia, or out of the Ukraine, or support for that, which I don't think we will, but that nuance or that signal that sends Putin, and keep in mind, Russia owns, I forget what it is, close to 70% of the Arctic Circle as they've got coastline there, and they've been building bases and training places up in the Arctic with China, doing training with China and other countries. And, they have been building up a military force up there. So if we show a weakened hand in the Ukrainian theater, I don't know. You don't know what's going to come out of this. And it is a gamble. So let's just hope that, we voted for Trump. We put him in there because we had the confidence he would do what we felt right for this country. There's no question that he loves this country more than I've ever seen any other president other than maybe Reagan and in my lifetime. And let's just see how this plays out, and hope it plays out peacefully and quickly.
Well, you mentioned about the Arctic Circle, and that reminds me of something that you rarely hear people talk about, and that is the vastness of Russia. It is a huge landmass country, and we talk about like the Amazon being where there's places where tribes of people that hadn't been really touched by man, but there are actually populations of people in Siberia that are very similar. There are areas in Siberia, they say, that no human being has ever actually put a footprint on.
Well, that's probably true, and I know there's a lot of people up there that are in the gulags that probably haven't seen people in a long time.
Very well could be.
From Vladimir Putin.
But something that the president said in that latest clip we played, he talked about you're playing with fire, so to speak, and they're talking about the potential for World War III. And I wonder, is that really? I mean, yes, I do believe that there is a definite unrest across the globe. To me, it's similar to World War I. But what are your thoughts on? Are we really that close to World War III right now?
I really think we are. If you look at the geopolitics around the world, and we know that person that's come from South Africa that's been through 3 money changes in their currency where it went to zero. If you look at the history of these countries that went to war, there was an economic collapse right on the verge of that. China's right on the verge of that. You look at our debt and you look at the interest we're paying just on our debt, it's unsustainable. You look at what's going on in the European theater and in their economy, it isn't real good. And so there's a lot of moving pieces, and all it does is take one misstep, and you've got World War III. And then you throw China in there wanting to take over Taiwan, which was a sovereign nation until Richard Nixon came out. And if China moves on Taiwan, Japan comes into a war with them, and that brings us into it. And it's the same thing on the European theater. And no telling what Kim Jong-un will do. He may just want attention and fire off another nuclear weapon somewhere.
Well, I have, as you might imagine, mixed feelings about where we are with World War III. I don't disagree with anything you just said, but I get in trouble with some of my friends because, and I guess I'm a little like Tucker Carlson in this regard, that I talk about things and they make it sound like I'm trying to defend Vladimir Putin,
right,
which I'm not. I do not trust that man. I do think if he could wave a magic wand, he would like to be emperor of the world. But I don't think that he is a raving lunatic madman either. He's a pragmatist, and I do believe he wants to recapture the old Soviet Union without
no
a doubt.
That's his. I mean, he stated that. And is he a madman? I don't know. If you sanction throwing people out of hotel rooms in the 21st century and poisoning them, it's like Dr. No in one of the James Bond movies. He's the ultimate bad character. And unfortunately, he has an arsenal of nuclear weapons and army. You should see what they're doing in Africa. They've got the what's left of the Wagner group going around. I don't want to say colonizing, but they have military camps going throughout Africa, and that's the ones that are feeding the terrorists down there. And Somalia, the DRC, all these places that are having internal conflicts, if not civil war, Russia is the one fomenting that and supplying them. So, yeah, they're not good people. The people of Russia, I'm sure, are great, just like the Chinese people, for the most part, are great. But it's the leaders of those countries. And I think if you want to solve these things, pick the leaders up, put them in an ultimate cage fight, and see who comes out.
So I guess the question I would have is if Vladimir Putin wants to basically not only reconquer the Soviet Union, which I think we both agree on that, but has designs on Western Europe and maybe ultimately America, is there any way to actually negotiate a peace with someone like that, or is it just inevitably going to lead to some type of war? That's the only question I have.
Well, we always got to think there's a way to peace, to get there peacefully. And if you look at our wars in the past, from World War I on, the end result is we developed big trade partners with the people that we were at war with. So ultimately, we'd like to have peace. Ukraine produces, I forget, one of the highest percentages of wheat in the world. And when Putin took over or invaded them, they bombed their wheat storage areas, the ports where the wheat couldn't get out. Price of wheat shot up. So this is something that he's done that's affected food prices around the world, and it brings food insecurity. And if you have people that are insecure in their food and they can't eat, violence breaks out. And so his actions need to be held accountable because he's as responsible, if not anybody, probably more than anybody else, because he's the one that was the invading force. And keep in mind, there was the agreements like the Minsk agreement and things like that, where they wouldn't do these things. They would not attack. And hands are being played. They're checking the water. Where is it weak? Where can we expand? And his ultimate goal is to rebuild the Soviet Empire. And it's interesting because his so-called ally, Xi Jinping of China, their goal is to take over the world. So you've got those two competing forces that will align with themselves now to take out the liberal democracies like the EU and the United States. And they're hoping that we just kind of fall on ourselves. And then you'll see Xi Jinping turn on Russia.
Yeah, well, you mentioned China, and it's making a little bit of news, but they're doing a lot of things in the Philippines right now. That actually their ambassador of the Philippines, United States, just talked about trying to strengthen ties and military ties with the United States and increase what we already are doing over there to push back against China right now. That's kind of being overshadowed by the Ukraine situation, but it is there are some skirmishes literally happening.
Well,
over there
it's not
now.
just the Philippines. They're doing it to Vietnam. They're going into their what they call the EEZ zones, the exclusive economic zones, exploring for oil. But now they're trying to extract it within the 200-mile agreement, the world agreement that is sovereign territory. They're doing it to all the Asian countries in the South China Sea, the East Sea, and so they're doing it to all those countries. And not only there, but they're doing it in South America. The influence they have in South America or in Latin America is just unbelievable, in the Caribbean too. And they have put a big footprint, and their influence is expanding, and ours is waning in around the world. And, you can't leave out Africa. I mean, they have like the DRC and all that. So these are things that, again, foreign policy delves into all this. And a lot of people say, well, I really don't care about foreign policy. It's not a dinner table topic for most people, but it affects everything we do. You look at the price of gas, look at the price of eggs. Citrus, that came from Asian beetle that's killed our citrus industry here, and it came over about 20 years ago. Foreign policy, was it done intentionally? I don't know. I don't want to start any conspiracies, but these are things that need to be dealt with on a national level. And it, like is Trump, it's a make America great again. We need to put America first on these policies to protect us, and it's not just for the now; it's for the posterity of this nation and future generations.
Well, there's an old saying about history repeating itself, and if the last 100 years of history repeats itself, then Europe doesn't go to war alone. We end up over there whether we like it or not. So,
and if you look at
and
history,
Asia, really,
it's
too.
about every 60 to 80 years there's a world conflict, a world war, and we're beyond that now. I think the Second World War ended in 1945, and so here we are, 80 years later.
Do we ever learn anything? Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and break this video down even more. We hope you'll not only check out our sponsors, but support them. And if you'd like to be a sponsor, you see that tagline
Absolutely.
about advertise with us. Contact the great Freddie there at that number on your screen, because we'd love to have your support, and we encourage
Sure would.
people to support our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators. The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company, Shoot GTR, On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth!
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Well, Ted, we're back, and we probably need to send that warthog that they play there to the front lines. He would be, he'd probably negotiate a peace.
That or he'd be dinner. That every time I see that, it reminds me of boar hog I had to go treat in a field up in Fort White. And this thing had to weigh 900 to 1,000 pounds. It was huge. And they didn't have a pen to put them in, or a chute, or a hog crate. And so I told the farmer, I says, I got this. So I walked up to him. I said, now don't be behind me, because I'm going to slip this needle of antibiotics right behind his ear in the fat pad, and I'm going to inject him. And as soon as I did that, that hog jumped up, turned at me with his tusks bared. My feet were stuck in the muck. And I turned around. Nobody's around me because I told them not to be there. And I had a life experience there,
Well,
so
I guess
every time I see this warthog, I think of that, especially when you see the camera guy running up the post.
Well, that's probably what gave you your bona fides to handle all these foreign policy issues. Because if you can handle wild hogs in Florida, you could surely handle something in
I got
all
some
over the
stories
world.
to tell you about some of the prime ministers and defense ministers I met from different countries, especially China and Laos. It was interesting because they were in Mexico. I had really good meetings with Mexico.
Well, we're glad to have you, everybody here watching us. We appreciate it. You saw our sponsors. I want to tell you where we are. We're broadcasting from an incredible place here, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill in Gainesville, Florida, in an area called Celebration Point, right off of the interstate. And this place, you see all these helmets behind you. This place is a monument to not only Steve Spurrier's great career, but it's basically a testament to sports in general. And not only that, but on a side note, the food is incredible.
Food's great, and it is. I'm glad you brought that up because you look around here, it's a museum. It's worth just coming in. They ought to do tours here. And it's a great tribute to Steve Spurrier, of course, the Gators, and college football, but sports all around.
Yes, it is. So we're grateful to be broadcasting here.
Sure are.
We're on twice a week now. We're live here on Mondays, and then we do it from our various homes. But if we get more sponsors and more views, we're going to carry this thing out, and eventually we hope to be going
John,
4 or 5 days.
when we get more
I got to be more positive about that, right? Well, in case you're just joining us, what we're talking about is as President Trump said, I don't know if this was a productive meeting, but great television when he and Zelensky and J.D. Vance and a cast of others were talking about trying to cut a peace deal between the Ukraine, the Soviet Union, and brokered by President Trump. So we've been breaking down this video. We're going to play another part here, and I titled it "Been Alone." Check it out, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank-
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
met
for
a
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak-
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again,
I tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than try.
Well, the part in that video, Ted, that really stood out to me, and I'm sure it triggered Mr. Trump a little bit, was when Zelensky said that they've been alone since Russia invaded. Now, on the one hand, I get it because they have had the most losses. It's their country, their citizens. But the reality is they've never been alone. The United States has supported them from day one and been the leader in the support for the Ukraine, and that includes the taxpayers of the United States of America.
I agree with that, and I think that was a misstep by Zelensky, and that's something he ought to apologize for. I don't ask anybody to apologize for anything. We just move on and get the job done. But it was something that he shouldn't have said that because the American people have been there. The now defunct USAID was doing a lot of humanitarian work. When you look at the destruction of those bombings, they were coming in. I forget what it was, but at one time I had met his wife, Zelensky's wife, and she said there was 50 bombings a day, and it's just not one bomb here and there. It's a cluster of them, and the people that were being killed, civilians and all that. Yeah, the American people have been there. USAID, or I should say foreign assistance, was there helping on the humanitarian side. No telling where else some of that other money went that is unaccounted for. But he has not been alone. He may feel like it.
Well, one part in that video where they talk about the amount of time, because President Trump says, you wouldn't have lasted 2 weeks without us. And of course, Zelensky says, well, I heard that from Putin. We wouldn't have lasted 3 days. But the reality is, and President Trump says it in another part of the video, that Obama gave them sheets. In other words, MRI meals and stuff. And President Trump says, I gave you Javelin missiles, which stopped tanks.
He was accurate on that because I was in there when I think it was Poroshenko, who was the previous president, that came to the Congress and did a meeting before Congress on the House floor there. And he goes, no offense, I appreciate the help. And this was under Obama. He goes, they're sending us blankets and flashlights. He goes, we need military equipment, the defensive stuff. And so Obama was terrible in this. Biden was worse, although Biden let a lot of money go over there. But it just, the whole thing with Biden, he was weak, and he was just being controlled by somebody else. And Trump did, under his first term, he was sending military armament that could build their military up. And if he was still in the White House, this war would not have broken out. I'm 100% convinced of that.
Yeah, I am too. And all you got to look at is the evidence of when other presidents were in there. That's when the Soviet Union or Russia, in this case, made their move. When Donald Trump was in there, they didn't make a move. And people forget this. They talk about, Trump being Putin's pocket puppet or whatever. But Donald Trump actually killed Russians in Syria, bombed them when he was president. And this has made very little news, but over the weekend, we actually hit Syria again. I don't know if you heard that, but we did some limited bombing to some Al-Qaeda targets this weekend. So, President Trump, I don't think he carries a big stick, but he don't walk softly. He carries both the stick and the verbiage.
He lets you know he's carrying a big stick.
Yeah, absolutely. And but he cares about America. And here's the thing, Ted, that maybe, you've worked more closely with the Democrats up there than I ever have. What is their plan? If Donald Trump is wrong, if he's actually a puppet of Vladimir Putin, what is the Democrats' plan to end the war?
Oh, that's an easy question. Their plan is to do anything they can to bog this down, to make Trump and the Republicans look bad so they can gain in power and go back to doing what they were doing under Biden. I mean, it's a terrible plan. Not just our country, but the world can't afford them to be back in power unless they have 100% American agenda first policy, which they didn't. And, the modern Democrat is at best I won't say it. There's a reason they're not in power.
You can whisper it to me.
I'll write it down here on my notepad.
That's why I'll say it.
You asked the plan. Their plan, they don't have a plan. Their plan is to defeat the public or the Republicans. And I use this analogy all the time. It's like having the Gator football team on the field playing FSU in our biggest rivalry game other than Georgia. And instead of focusing on beating that team, it's the offense trying to beat the defense and vice versa. And that's what the Democrats are doing. They should be working to solve this problem along with the Republicans. And that's where they need to come together. We as Americans need to be doing this.
Yeah, I guess in defense of Zelensky, Mr. Vladimir Zelensky, I have trouble.
Huh?
It's hard. There's not too many in Hawthorne.
Zelensky.
Yes. Well, you made a sports analogy. It's kind of like playing a football game where at halftime they fired the coach and there's a whole new coach out there with a new team. That's what Zelensky is dealing with. It's the halftime in the war, 3 years. Now you've got a new coach, a new commander-in-chief, and Donald Trump, and it's a whole new ballgame.
It sure is. And if I was him, Zelensky, I would do whatever I can to have the support of the United States. But again, the way Trump negotiates, it may not be a bad thing to kind of oust him to make the European Union and that whole area really pick up the sticks and say, you know what, this is in our backyard. We need to come together and we need to prepare for this. I hate to see him build a standing army because that signal that sends is a strong message, and I think Putin will be more threatened by that. So.
Yeah, I've asked a few of my friends, so to speak, on Facebook that are very liberal here. The Democratic Party used to be, at least it appeared to be, anti-war. Yeah. But that seems to have totally gone away. And they're for perpetual war everywhere. Is what it seems to me. We're going to play one more clip from this, and this is where I think Donald Trump, because, talking about, people are saying this should have been behind closed doors, and even J.D. Vance says that in here, but it's really interesting what President Trump's response to that is. Let's play it, and we'll come back and talk about it.
We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards. You're buried there. Your people are dying. You're running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running low on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look, If you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you'd take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
it doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what.
That wasn't with.
Well, I think the interesting to me, Ted, part of that video clip is where JD, Vice President Vance, chimes in that you shouldn't have done this out in front of the TV cameras. This should have been behind closed doors. And most people seem to agree with that. But Donald Trump, President Trump says, kind of interrupts and basically says, but I think this is good for the American people to see. And I kind of get his point, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think it is too. I mean, to a point, the bantering back and forth, I think it, personally, I think it shows poor taste on diplomacy from the American standpoint, you know, for what we're trying to project in the world. But I also think it sends that signal too, to where, you know, this president is saying we're not to be fooled around with or screwed with, I was going to say, but probably not right to say on the air. But, you know, he's going to take a tough stance. And, you know, this will work out, and I think it'll work out favorable for Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, and for us.
Well, and I kind of want to get into, like, where do we go from here? And one of the things that, and this is just my opinion, people may disagree with me, but when I see all this stand for Ukraine, I'm all for trying to help preserve the Ukraine. But what does it really mean? I think that's what people need to get to. This is where, when Zelensky continuously says security guarantees, and after this this dust up they had, he went on Brett Baer's show on Fox and did an interview where he must have said 20 times about security guarantees. But to me, security guarantees at the end of the day means potentially boots on the ground. Maybe I'm overstating that, but that's kind of what I see that leading to.
Well, it depends on how things escalate. And if you go back to the Minsk agreement, when the Soviet Union broke apart and Ukraine had the nuclear weapons, when they returned the nuclear weapons, there was an agreement that Russia would protect them and that the EU would protect them and that we would be a part of that protectorate. And there was also an agreement that Putin said they would not attack the Ukraine, that they would respect them. And he's broken those promises. And so that's where Zelensky was coming out and saying, we got to have protection, because that goes back to the Minsk agreement back in the, I guess it would have been in the late 80s, early 90s, when that happened. And if we don't stand up for things that we agreed to do, our word is nothing, you know, and it comes down to, and your dad and you, I know you were raised this way, you're only as good, a man is only as good as his word, and that should apply to nations.
Absolutely. And while you were talking, a thought just occurred to me. I'd like to get your input on it, that one of the things I think that President Trump is reluctant to say security guarantees is because he's a man of his word. I mean, if you look at like Jerusalem being the capital of Israel,
right,
presidents kept saying since the founding of the state of Israel that they would move the embassy and recognize Israel, and none of them did it. President Trump did it. Presidents been talking about things like Doge for a long time. Everybody's against waste and fraud, but President Trump is actually doing something about it. My point is that if President Trump says that he's going to guarantee their security, then that's exactly what he will do. He's not going to waffle and waver on that. And I think that's why he's reluctant to do it, because he knows that in his mind, that means U.S. troops and U.S. forces potentially being on the ground.
And that is the dicey thing. You don't want to, we just don't want to go there. I mean, we do not want to enter another war. I mean, it'll be a meltdown around the world. And you were talking about the embassy in Jerusalem, moving to Jerusalem. And you know who started that in Congress?
I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't you.
No, it wasn't me. It was, Ron DeSantis brought that up.
Ron DeSantis.
And he carried that through, and he was over there for the signing of that. I mean, that was something that he pushed through, and he did a good job. We supported that. Like you said, a lot of these guys talk about, oh, we're going to fix this, or we're going to fix this spending, this out-of-hand spending, or this stuff that's just doing crazy spending, whether it's USAID or the NIH. And Trump is the one that did that. That would be a good point for another show to talk about where do we go from here now that he's broken that apparatus of foreign assistance. What comes after that? Is all foreign aid bad? Is there any good? Is it an expense or is it an investment? So those are things that we need to be talked about. And I'd love to hear from the listeners on your talk about or on your thoughts on that.
Yes, chime in on Facebook, chime in on YouTube, and we will answer them. We're going to start trying to do it in real time, but we definitely will go by after the fact and respond to your questions and comments. And if you have ideas or topics you think we should be discussing, we would love your input on that.
Well, I know you've gotten some questions and phone calls from people, as I did, and we appreciate them coming in to ask us about different things, and they bring up great points, and so we like that feedback.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we got about 5 minutes left in the show, and I want to talk about a few topics, and I know you listed a few here. Donald Trump, this Tuesday night.
I'm going to pull up my list.
This Tuesday night is going to be given, they don't call it really the State of the Union address, but that is basically what it is, a joint session of Congress. And what do you think about the first basically 6 weeks of Donald Trump's presidency and what he might talk about
That's
Tuesday
a great
night?
question. I love it because, as you were just saying, and I said this in a Foreign Affairs Committee when I was a witness a couple of weeks ago, everybody talks about fixing these things, and we know what's going on, and we get Inspector General reports, but nobody does anything. And that's the whole bottleneck in Washington. There's action or there's talk and rhetoric, but there's just people step away from making a decision, because if you make a decision, then you have to stand by it. And so the easiest thing is just to punt, wait for the next election. And so Trump said no more of this, and they're doing it. I am so happy he's doing what he's doing with Doge. It's going to be messy, it's going to be ugly, but if you look at what he did with the foreign assistance, it's a 90-day pause, and that's the realm I deal with up there in D.C. when I go up there. People are losing their heads, and they're going crazy over it, but it's a 90-day pause. And I'm hearing people, we're going bankrupt the day he announced it. Excuse me. And if you're going bankrupt from day one, you're going to go bankrupt anyways because you weren't doing a very good business. But I think when the dust settles, you're going to see is any program that comes back, they're going to be effective. They're going to move America forward in be in alignment with Trump and Rubio, making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. And I look forward to that. It's going to happen in the VA. It's going to happen through all these things. One of the things you're hearing now is in the budget, Medicaid. They're saying, well, the budget's going to strip all this Medicaid, and you're seeing Republicans in these marginal districts where it's, not a high percentage. They're saying, well, we can't support this because it's going to hurt Medicaid in our district. The changes to Medicaid are the work requirements that they're putting into the food stamp programs. If you're an able-bodied adult between the ages of 18 and 65 and you can work but don't, your aid is going to probably be adjusted, if not cut off. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
Absolutely
it's
not.
biblical. Man shall earn his bread by the sweat of his brow. And I know you did that, and I did that.
It reminds me of a Big Sid story, my dad. So I used to be a commercial fisherman.
John, come over here and sit down here in my lap.
Well, I used to be a commercial. We were talking about the Oscars earlier, real quickly, kind of jokingly. But I don't hardly go to movies anymore. But I used to go religiously, and you'll get a kick out of this. So
were they religious movies?
Sometimes. But I used to come home on Fridays, right, and sell my fish. And so, like Friday at 1 o'clock, I had nothing to do for a few days, and I would go home. Now, keep in mind, I've been up for like 24 hours a day, 3 or 4 days, 5 days straight.
Inclement weather.
Worn out. And I'd go home, and I was living with my dad at the time, and I would just pass out. Well, he just couldn't stand the fact that at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in the lazy boy asleep, and he'd go, boy, ain't you got something to do? So I actually started going to the movies so I could get a good nap because Big Sid, he understood how much I was working, but he couldn't see a grown man doing nothing. That just bothered him.
I'd have to be on Sid's side. If you ask my kids, I was the same way. I didn't have that option. Carol and I were broke as a church mouse.
I'm pretty much the same way. So we only got about a minute left. What do you expect to come out of? How do you think the Democrats are going to react? What do you expect expectations of President Trump's speech tomorrow night? Because we'll certainly talk about it on Friday, I'm sure.
You know, that's a good point, because the Democrats are lining up now to bring in people, federal workers that have been let go, fired, whatever you want to call it, and they're going to be in there. There's going to be a lot of protests, a lot of booing and yelling, but that's their playbook. They're trying to do that, working to the midterms, to say, look how irresponsible and how damaging the Republicans are, but they don't tell you how bad the country was with the $36 trillion in debt, that our interest, the debt servicing our interest, is higher than what we spend on the military. And we're at a point now where we need to build this military up. So that's what you're going to see from the Democrats is, you know, look at how bad, boo, 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 but they don't have a solution. Trump is doing a solution. It's ugly. It's anytime you make a change, people don't like change, and it'll turn out good. I have confidence and faith that it'll turn out good. Number one, because we supported Trump, we put him in office. Number two, because of our constitutional republic system that's been tried and tested, and it's being tested again, and it'll come out stronger.
Well, thank you, Ted, and thank everybody for tuning in to us. You know, it reminds me of there is a Confucius prayer, we're talking about China, that says, may you live in interesting times. I think we certainly do, and things are going to get more interesting by the day.
They are.
And we're going to put our spin on it Friday. So tune back into our show on Friday. Like what we're doing. Share what we're doing. You can find us pretty much anywhere you see your favorite podcast, but chime in, tell us what you think, and we'll respond.
Right.
Ted, I hope you have a great rest of your
and
week.
give a shout out to our sponsors and support them, and we appreciate you tuning in. Let us know your comments. We'll see you Friday.
Peace.